Hello, listeners. This is Caleb Keith, director of the 1517 Podcast Network, with a special message for you. As the year comes to a close, we at the 1517 Podcast Network want to thank you for being a part of our mission to declare and defend the gospel of Jesus Christ. For years, we've worked to share the life-changing message of the forgiveness of sins for you through podcasts, articles, books, and events. But we can't do it without you. This year, we're aiming to raise $300,000 for our end-of-year campaign to sustain our mission and continue creating content that proclaims the good news of Jesus Christ to the world. Your generosity directly supports everything we do, from producing podcasts like the one you're listening to right now, or to reaching people at home through articles, videos, and even conferences who are in need of the hope and comfort found only in the gospel of Christ. Would you consider giving a gift today? Every donation, big or small, helps us share Christ's work. And again, our end-of-year need is $300,000. Please visit 1517.org/donate to make your year-end gift now. Thank you for partnering with us to keep this message alive and thriving for generations to come. God's peace be with you.
Welcome to another episode of 40 Minutes in the Old Testament. 40 Minutes in the Old Testament is a 1517 Podcast Network podcast. You can go to 1517.org/podcast. Check out all the other podcasts that are living over there. And while you're over there, make sure you check out everything else that 1517 is doing. All the articles, all the academies, all the events. Check it all out. There's so much. If you've never been over there and you just listen to this podcast, today's the day. I mean, just type in 1517 into your search engine of choice. Click on there and just start looking around, and you're going to find days and days and weeks and months worth of content for you to consume. And while you're over there, you'll also see that little donate button in the right-hand corner, and you can click on that to support the work for all that stuff. And of course, this podcast. It's only possible because people like you do that. So if you would like to support what we're doing, we would very much appreciate it. And if you do support it, then thank you very much. We are in Isaiah chapter 4. It's a short chapter. We didn't make it through. It's a chapter of 6 verses, and somehow we were only able to get through 4 of them. So I guess if we were trying to, make it sound better, we got 2/3 of the way through this chapter. So not too bad. We ended with Isaiah saying that, hey, the day of the Lord is coming, right? And it sounds nice, actually. A lot of times, Chad, you hear about the day of the Lord, and it's all death and destruction. But he says that there's going to be actually some good things that happen on the day of the Lord. That there's going to be some people that are recorded for life. There you go. That there's going to be a record for them. That they're going to get life, and that the Lord's going to wash away the filth of the daughters of Zion, and He's going to cleanse the bloodstains from Jerusalem and all that, and the Mount of Zion you're gonna have that cloud by day and smoke and shining flame fire by night. And there's going to be this big glory canopy is what we're getting into in verse 5. So that's sort of the context that he's talking about, and this is like typical of Isaiah, where it's horrible, and then you get like these little shots of that sounds pretty. That doesn't sound that bad though. That sounds pretty good. How do I get in on that end?
Yeah. This is these 6 verses, 5 verses in this chapter. I mean, it's this brilliant shining light, and then you step into chapter 5, and the door closes, and you're in complete darkness again. In fact, all the chapter 5 is going to be dark, and then you got to get ready for chapter 6, where you have this great call vision of Christ who's enthroned within His temple, and all the things that you see there. So, I mean, it's a topsy-turvy walk through Isaiah, up and down, up and down.
He says, hey, here's what's coming, and it's bad. I mean, it's bad. But here there's this thing, and you're like, oh, thank God. And he's like, but not yet. And then right back to...
Yeah, it is back and forth. Man, these last couple of verses, 5 and 6, he is he is weaving together a whole bunch of stuff here. We got marriage language, you got Exodus language, you got Zion language. Isaiah is, I guess all the prophets do this, but Isaiah seems to be this model of taking previous biblical stories and verses and metaphors and just weaving them together in this magnificent gospel tapestry. It's just for instance, so just listen to this language. He begins with, then the Lord will create. All right. Well, that word in Hebrew is bara. It's the verb that we find in Genesis 1. God created the heavens and the earth. And it's one of these few verbs in the Old Testament where when you have that verb used, the only one who ever uses it is God. So there's a Hebrew verb for forgive, salach, and God is the only subject of that. So here we have this verb, bara, to create, which automatically sends us back to Genesis 1. All right, so God's going to be doing some creating here. All right, well, where's he going to do this creating? Well, then we shift to Zion. So you got all of the Zion, Jerusalem, temple stuff kind of in the background, right? And then you read a little bit further and you hear about this cloud by day and a shining of a flaming fire by night. Well, that takes you from Genesis to Exodus with all of the pillar of fire and pillar of cloud that's guiding the Israelites through the wilderness. And then you get to the end of that verse, and it says, over all the glory, there's going to be in Hebrew, a chuppah, a canopy. And this is the same word that, in fact, they still use this in Jewish wedding ceremonies, this canopy that's over the bride and groom. So you've got kind of this wedding imagery, which takes you to, of course, a lot of different places in the Old Testament, but I'm thinking like the Song of Songs in particular. And then you have language of a booth for shade. Well, that's booth in Hebrew is a sukkah. That's the noun behind the Feast of Tabernacles or booths, which remembers the time that the Israelites were in the wilderness. So, all of this is like woven into two verses. You got creation, you got Exodus, you got marriage themes, you got tabernacles themes, and he compresses all of this together in just a couple of verses. And it's Isaiah's, and more expansively, the Old Testament's way of preaching the gospel. So to put it in New Testament language, we might say something like, so in the great and glorious day, when God sends his Messiah, here's what he's going to do. There's going to be some new creation stuff that happens. And this new creation stuff is going to be connected with what happens in Jerusalem, because there our Lord is going to be crucified and resurrected. And there's going to be a new Exodus too. Just like you had a cloud, pillar of cloud and pillar of fire, so there's going to be this new Exodus where the Lord himself is present to guide us from the exile of sin and death and the devil into this place of freedom and life. And what's going to happen is there's going to be this wedding in which Christ makes his bride his own. It's going to be this canopy over the two of them as they celebrate these nuptials. And the result will be that the Lord himself will dwell among us. He's going to be our tabernacle. He's going to be our temple, our refuge, our shelter from every storm in life. That's basically taking what he puts into just two succinct verses and then expanding it out with New Testament language. But it's a beautiful section, just packed with gospel.
Yeah, it's hard to add anything to that, Chad. That's sort of all the stuff, right?
Yeah.
You have this shot of promise that I'm gonna, and this is what it is that it's look, judgment's coming, and it's going to be like a pretty bad judgment. In fact, so bad that I'm going to have to recreate everything. But I'm not creating all new stuff, but I am making all things new, right? And so it's not completely divorced from what I have made and instituted and said was good. It's the same kind of stuff, just without all the sin and the decay and all of that. And so that's what you have here is like this promise that I'm going to redo all this stuff, but it's not altogether different than what I've done before. It's just I'm going to deal with this sin thing.
Yeah. He's taking what exists and he's cleansing it, he's redeeming it, he's restoring it, we might say, and making it better than it ever was before. Just to use an analogy from his own life, so when Christ came as the last Adam, to redeem all things, he didn't like create some sort of new superhuman nature to assume. Yeah. He didn't come down like some alien. No, he came down as a flesh and blood human being in his incarnation. So he's assuming what already is in order to redeem it, to glorify it, and to make it a new creation. And that's kind of what he does with everything. He makes a new and better Exodus, a new and better creation, a new and better tabernacle, a new and better Zion. He builds on what is already there. And in the end, he makes it even better than it was before.
Yeah, that you definitely see that in the resurrection. It's not as though like Christ was resurrected and all of a sudden he's disembodied or something like that. It's not how it works at all. Like he's raised again. He's got scars and he eats breakfast and all this stuff because what he said is good is in fact good. It wasn't that he said it was good and it wasn't. It is good, and the earth and all this creation is good. Sin is the issue. It has nothing to do with the quality of what he initially made.
Yeah. Hey, the resurrection's going to be awesome. I mean, you can eat food and you can walk through doors.
Yeah.
You've got all the benefits. You can enjoy life in a created body at the same time. You can do things that we can't do now.
Yeah.
Whatever that might be, but certainly Jesus can walk through doors if he needs to.
Whatever sin has limited is what you get to do, whatever. And I don't know that we know exactly what sin is limited, but I think it's a lot.
Yeah. Eye hath not seen nor ear heard what the Lord has in store for us, for sure. All right, so, man, I really hate to leave chapter 4 because I know it's coming, but sometimes you got to leave the light to walk in the darkness for a little bit.
Well, you're
right?
not going to get that new creation unless you get that vineyard destroyed.
All right. Well, let's hear about this love song, right? I'm going to read. I'll read down to verse 7 because that really takes in this whole section about the vineyard. There's a lot of beautiful stuff, a lot of beautiful and ugly stuff here, but a lot of ugly stuff for sure.
So it's bad stuff written in the best way.
That's it. Yeah, this is like some ugly stuff written in some beautiful language. That's the best way to put it. Okay, so let me sing for my beloved my love song concerning his vineyard. That's the way he starts out. So makes you think, oh, this is going to be awesome. It's a love song. Everybody knows love songs are beautiful, right? He's just kind of teasing us, I think, the way he starts out. My beloved had a vineyard on a very fertile hill. He dug it, cleared it of stones, and planted it with choice vines. He built a watchtower in the midst of it, and he hewed out a wine vat in it. So, man, he went to town on this. He did everything. And then what happened? He looked for it to yield grapes, but it yielded, now I'm going to alter the ESV here, stink fruit. I love that translation. Wild grapes is what ESV has. Yielded stink fruit or wild grapes. A trash crop, we might say. And he goes on. And now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem and men of Judah, judge between me and my vineyard. What more was there to do for my vineyard that I have not done in it? When I looked for it to yield grapes, why did it yield wild grapes, stink fruit? And now I will tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will remove its hedge, and it shall be devoured. I will break down its wall, and it shall be trampled down. I will make it a waste. It shall not be pruned or hoed, and briars and thorns shall grow up. I will also command the clouds that they rain no rain upon it. And then we get in verse 7 to the, if you haven't really caught on with the interpretation, well, here you go. He's going to make it explicit. For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah are his pleasant planting. And now I almost have to read this. In Hebrew. So I'll just read it in Hebrew. I'll read it in English and Hebrew. You ready? You got to hear this. This is, I think, the best Hebrew wordplay in the entire Old Testament right here. So he looked for mishpat, and behold, mispach. He looked for tzedakah, and behold, tzedakah. So he looked for justice, mishpat, and behold, bloodshed, mispach. He looked for righteousness, tzedakah, and behold, an outcry, tzedakah. So Isaiah is going all out here to bring home in this kind of crescendo at the end exactly the reverse fruit of what God expected to receive from his vineyard.
Yeah, this love song a little bit different than the love song we just got done going through, and this is it starts similar. You have some beloved language, and vineyards and all that kind of stuff is not foreign to the Song of Solomon, but it is interesting how you do have the Song of Solomon, then you just 5 chapters into the next book, and you have like, whoa, I think this relationship went south. Yeah, definitely. In fact, when you think the way the biblical books are structured canonically, that actually works really well to go from the Song of Songs to this. Because, not only the vineyard, if you remember the bride in the Song of Songs uses vineyard as a metaphor for her own body. So you not only have that language, but you also have this language of dode, which is translated as lover or beloved. So both of those terms are deeply rooted in the Song of Songs. And again, it's called a love song, which kind of leads you to believe this is going to be a wonderful, wonderful song. Kind of creates this atmosphere of divine romance with Israel. At the same time, though, it's he's kind of teasing us because by calling it a love song and heightening our expectations of what it's going to be, then he conceals the coming disaster. So you can kind of see his hearers listening, but like, oh yeah, great, Isaiah's going to sing us this love song. We're going to hear all about God and us and the vineyard, and then it comes crashing down halfway through. This, of course, is the source from which Jesus draws his images of the vineyard. You've got let's see, get the parable of the wicked tenants. You got that. Of course, the tenants are in the vineyard. You've got the parable of the two sons, the older and the two sons who are both told to go and work in the vineyard. One says yes and doesn't do it. One says no, but later goes and does it. And you got it's not really a vineyard parable, but in Luke you have the parable of the fig tree that's planted in the vineyard, and of course looks for 3 years for fruit and doesn't bear any. And I guess you could throw in the parable of like the vine and the branches that Jesus uses in John chapter 15. But all of that vineyard language is rooted in chapters like Isaiah 5, and I believe it's Psalm 80 uses that same language of Israel as a vineyard. But it's all rooted back here in the Old Testament. Yeah, and what you have here is this in poetic language. I mean, God is saying, I did all this stuff, right? So what is that stuff? I mean, he delivered you from Egypt. He defeated all kinds of enemies for you, gave you a land, protected you, all this stuff, did all these things, instituted a bunch of stuff for you. And this is him sort of tending to the vineyard. This is him getting it all ready. And then he goes, and what's he looking for? He's looking for justice and righteousness, and he finds bloodshed and unrighteousness, right? This is the wild grapes that it yields. So he does all this work, and all he's looking for is justice and righteousness. That's the harvest he is hoping to gather, and he can't find any of that anywhere in this vineyard.
Yeah, and what he expects is the natural outcome of the plants that he's planted. For instance, he doesn't plant grapevines and expect them to yield apples. He doesn't plant a cherry tree and expect it to yield bananas or something. He's expecting the fruit that comes from the plants which he planted. I mean, this is naturally what would happen, right? You plant a good tree, you expect good fruit. You don't expect bad fruit. And yet what happens is the exact obverse of that. So instead of getting the fruit of righteousness, you get the fruit of an outcry. Instead of getting the fruit of justice, you get the fruit of bloodshed. So everything that God has done for Israel, and there's nothing that he hasn't done for Israel, he makes that clear. He says, what? Judge between me and my vineyard. What more could I do? I mean, did I forget something? Did I leave something out? I mean, is there something I didn't do for you? I mean, I redeemed you. I led you. I gave you all these things. Was there something missing? And of course the answer is no. So then why, when I look for this kind of fruit, do I see the exact opposite? And then that leaves us basically with him saying, well, what choice do I have then? I mean, if this vineyard has been doing this, then I really don't have any other option to deal with a vineyard that produces this kind of rotten fruit other than to kind of do what we were talking about earlier, to start over, to do some recreation. But the only way you're going to get to the recreation is by, to use the language of the parable, by removing its hedge so it's devoured, and breaking down its wall so it's trampled down, and making it a waste, no pruning, no hoeing, so that briars and thorns grow up. And on top of all that, I'm going to make sure that no rain falls on it so that it doesn't receive any moisture. This is poetic language to describe what God does over and over in the history of Israel. I mean, it's the way he still continues to work in our lives today. He engages in the work of destruction precisely to bring forth that which he can make into something which is new. He brings us down to death in order to raise us to life. He brings us to some sort of loss in order to bring us to the point of being found again in him. It's the parable of the prodigal son, over and over reacted in our lives, in major and in minor ways. That's what's happening in Israel. It's what's happening in Isaiah's day. It's certainly what's going to happen in Jeremiah's day when you had the Babylonian exile. And it's what happened all the way down to really the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, when the Romans once more destroyed that temple. And all of these were God's way of saying, hey, I'm breaking down my vineyard so that we can get to the point to where it's kind of like, come, let us reason together, it says in chapter 1. Your sins are like crimson, are like scarlet. So repent and let me make them white as snow. Because I'm standing here basically with my arms open wide, beckoning you to come to me so that you can receive this new creation.
Yeah, let me tell you let me give you a bad analogy here. We'll see if it works. So we had, in the spring, we had some tornadoes here, and at the house there was these two massive trees that were uprooted, and like literally the roots got torn out of the ground. So it wasn't just that the trees got snapped off, but the whole root system comes out. And I don't know if you know about root systems on very large trees, but it created a huge mess. And like there's the fence is like smashed down in certain places. The whole backyard is a disaster. And so you call in the people that know what to do about this. And the first thing they said was like, well, to fix all this, we got to tear the rest of this fence down. Because we got this fence has got to come down because we got to get the equipment back there to chop all this stuff up, and the stump grinders and these backhoes to dig up the rest of these root balls, all this stuff. And as this process goes on, this yard starts looking worse. You thought the tornado was bad. A day into this process, you're like, guys, you've made this worse. I mean, the fence is down now. There's just stuff everywhere, but this is how it goes with most things. When you decide to make something new, you got to rip it all apart, and it looks it gets worse before it gets better. There was no way for them to walk back there and then immediately start getting better. It must get worse first.
Yeah, I'm sure people who flip houses discover this all the time, right? Yeah. Go into a house, it needs some work, and then you go back in a couple weeks later, and you're like, man, what happened? This place is like torn apart, right?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah. You got to strip it down to the bones sometimes if you're going to actually be able to engage in the work of recreation that's required.
Yeah, and this is the way it is with God. I mean,
the way it is.
He lays it to waste first before he rebuilds.
Man, I wish it were otherwise, but I also know. For personal experience, but I also know this is the best way. This is the only way that any true and lasting work of recreation is going to happen, is when God moves in with a hammer and a saw and a sledgehammer, gets to work and is able to tear down, or he might build back up. All right, so that's the parable of the vineyard, one of the few parables we have in the Old Testament. And now, to cheer everybody up, I know you're kind of feeling down, so to cheer you up, we have a series of 6 woes, just to really put a smile on your face. We got
woes are always a mood lifter.
Just add a little bit of joy to this party. So yeah, we got 6 woes coming up, and we got 4 therefores coming up. So woe to those, and as a result of what these people who receive the woe are doing, there's going to be some therefore that God is going to do in reaction to this. So I'm going to I'll do the first couple of woes, and then we'll do the therefores after that. So this is verse 8 through 12. Woe to those who join house to house, who add field to field, until there is no more room, and you are made to dwell alone in the midst of the land. The Lord of hosts has sworn in my hearing, surely many houses shall be desolate, large and beautiful houses, without inhabitants. For 10 acres of vineyard shall yield but 1 bath, and a homer of seed shall yield but an ephah. Woe to those who rise early in the morning, that they may run after strong drink, who tarry late into the evening, as wine inflames them. They have lyre and harp, tambourine and flute and wine at their feast. But they do not regard the deeds of the Lord, or see the works of his hands. So that's quite a start to our 6 woes. We got the 2 of them starting out. So if we were to broadly characterize the message of the first 2 woes, well, the first one is woe to those who basically are driving out the poor. They're gobbling up ancestral land in order to make it their own. They're adding field to field, house to house, and they're so basically taking over the area that they're squeezing everybody out. So this is the haves, the powerful, who are depriving everyone around them of that which is theirs, not only by tradition, by ancestral right, but also by biblical mandate. Because, of course, in the Bible, your land is going to be your son's land, and your grandsons, and your great-grandsons, and, this goes all the way down. This, you can hear story after story about this in the Scriptures. So that is being undermined by what happens here. That's the first woe. And the second woe is more directed toward kind of a moral depravity, which is, in this case, illustrated by overconsumption of alcohol. It's almost, if it wasn't such a sad woe, then it'd be almost funny. Like, woe to those who rise early in the morning. Why? So that they can run after strong drink.
Yeah, set my alarm. I'm going
to
to set my alarm
in the morning
for...
so I can run to the liquor store.
Yeah.
But it's kind of it's a crazy, it's dark humor, but it's kind of a crazy image. Man, I can't wait to get up in the morning so I can go for a run to the liquor store. That's kind of the and then I'm going to stay up way late. And I'm going to get out all my instruments. We're going to have a band with lyres and harps and tambourines and flutes. And we're going to have a feast. And we're going to get drunk. We're going to get up early to get drunk. And then we're going to stay up late to get drunk. And all the time we're engaged in this, we're not going to pay any attention whatsoever to the deeds of the Lord or to the works of his hands. So I did kind of have to laugh when I was looking at this morning. Talk about a verse that makes no sense to us in translation. Verse 10, for 10 acres of vineyard shall yield but 1 bath. We're all like, okay, is that good or is that bad? I'm assuming it's bad, but I don't know. And then this one is even better. And a homer of seed shall yield but an ephah. So let me put this in some language we can understand. So 10 acres, and even the literal translation is kind of funny. It's like it's basically like 10 yoke of oxen. And that means like the amount of land that these oxen can plow. So you got 10 acres. 10 acres is going to yield 6 gallons. That's it. You got 10 acres of vineyard, you're going to get 6 gallons is it. And then the homer of seed, well, that'd be like homer of seed yielding an ephah. That'd be like you plant 100 pounds of seed, and when you do the harvest, you get 10 pounds at the harvest. I mean, it's supposed to be the opposite, right? You know, you plant a little bit of seed, you get a whole lot of crop, and here you're getting a crop that yields 1/10 of what you planted. So this is basically God saying, you who have devoured the land, have driven out the have-nots and used your might and your muscle and your wealth and your influence and whatever else to take over this property. Well, I'm gonna make this property basically worthless, so that if you have 10 acres of vineyard, you're just going to get a few gallons of wine from that, and your crops are not going to yield but 10% of what you planted. So that's the first 2 woes. Anything else you want to add to those?
Nope. I think I get it.
Enough. Get it.
Sounds
All right,
sounds
so
bad.
It is bad. So we got the 2 woes, and now we got 2 therefores. Therefore, on the basis of what he has condemned, he says, therefore my people will go into exile for lack of knowledge. Their honored men go hungry, and their multitudes is parched with thirst. Got a nice contrast there with, you have all these houses, but you're going to go into exile. You have all this, getting up early and staying up late to pursue drink, but you're going to be parched. You're going to be thirsty. That's the first therefore. The second therefore is this. Therefore Sheol has enlarged its appetite and opened its mouth beyond measure. And the nobility of Jerusalem and her multitude will go down, her revelers, and he who exalts in her. Man is humbled, and each one is brought low. And the eyes of the haughty, literally the eyes of the high or the haughty are brought low. But the Lord of hosts is lifted up. He's exalted in justice, and the holy God shows himself in righteousness. Then shall the lambs graze as in their pasture, and the nomads shall eat among the ruins of the rich is what the ESV has here. I love the literal translation here. It's I don't even know how you'd put it, like the fatted, because this word is the word that's used for like a fat sheep. But here it's applied metaphorically to the rich, the fat ones, the rich folks. So we began the second therefore with Sheol, or the grave, death itself, is depicted as kind of this monster with this massive mouth and even bigger appetite. So it's gobbling up. It's enlarging its appetite, opening its mouth, and it's gobbling down the nobility of Jerusalem, the multitudes, the revelers, and the ones who exult in her. Of course, this is not only literarily, but theologically the picture of people being brought low.
Yeah.
So you're strutting about in your pride, your haughtiness, your arrogance, and so you've lifted yourself up, and so God is going to do what? What God always does. He's going to push you down low to humble you. I think we talked about this either last episode or the episode before that, where it's much better to be humbled than to be humbled.
Yeah.
In this case, they're going to be humbled.
This is a pretty vivid picture. We should probably bring this one back, where it's the idea here is that as unrighteousness and injustice increase, death's appetite increase. It's like almost as though death sees the grave witnesses injustice and unrighteousness going on, and it gets hungry.
Stirs up its appetite.
Yeah, which is pretty freaky. Where you take a look around and you say, "Man, I think the grave is getting hungry."
Yeah, you ever like walk into a store or your house, your wife's cooking, and the smell hits you, and instantly your stomach starts growling.
Yeah.
That's kind of the image here. Sheol's walking around, not really thinking about eating, and then it starts smelling injustice and wickedness, and it
says time to eat.
Time to eat. Yeah. So it's an unforgettable image. So that's the first part. That's the 2 woes and the 2 therefores. So we got some more woes coming up. Let me read the next 4. Woe to those who draw iniquity with cords of falsehood, who draw sin as with cart ropes, who say, Let him be quick. Let him speed his work that we may see it. Let the counsel of the Holy One of Israel draw near, and let it come that we may know it. In other words, if God's going to be doing all this, yeah, well, let's see it. I'm not going to believe it till I see it. That's the first woe. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Next woe. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and shrewd in their own sight. And then we finish off our woes with something that echoes one of the opening woes. Woe to those, and I always thought this is so prophetically sarcastic. Woe to those who are heroes at drinking wine and valiant men in mixing strong drink. Woe to those, heroic bartenders. It's and heroic wine drinkers. Oh, you guys, you're true heroes. And then he finishes up by saying, who acquit the guilty for a bribe and deprive the innocent of his right. I mean, you're talking about bringing an image back. I love this opening image. What are those who draw iniquity with cords of falsehood and draw sin as with cart ropes? It's the idea like you have sinners walking around who are so attached to their sinful ways, they are dragging it behind them.
Yeah, even this is like the insanity of sin. And if you're a sinner, which you are, you should maybe be able to relate to this, where your sin, although it be a burden, you're like, oh, I'm bringing it with me.
Yeah.
like it's not convenient. It's a lot of work, but man, I love it. And so, this particular,
tie it to me.
Yes, this iniquity, I will cart it around like it's a necessity.
Yeah. It's that's one of those things that you can see in your mind as it's happening. All right, let me keep going here. We got a couple therefores coming up. Therefore, as the tongue of fire devours the stubble, and as dry grass sinks down in the flame, so their root will be as rottenness, and their blossoms go up like dust. We have one of these clinching statements here. Why is all this happening? Because they have rejected the Torah of the Lord of hosts. So they've turned away from his word, and they've despised the word of the Holy One of Israel. Always goes back to that, doesn't it? It always goes back to not hearing the word of God and keeping it. That's the what's happening in Israel. That's first, therefore.
Well, and two, this isn't simply. Look at the two words that it uses here. It's rejected and despised, right? It's not that you heard it, but you didn't exactly apply it correctly, or you didn't take it and follow through on it perfectly. It's not even that. It's not that you missed it. It wasn't that. It's that you heard it, then you said no, so you rejected that. And not only that, maybe someone came along again and said, and then you said, I actually hate that thing.
Yeah. These aren't sins of ignorance. Oh, I had no idea that this was displeasing to God. No, it's like, oh, that's displeasing to God? That's exactly what I'm going to do.
Yeah. This despising of the word of God. I saw this interesting thing where this guy asked, it was a young guy that he asked this to, too, and he asked, it was like, I don't know where it was. I don't know if it was on a college campus or what, but this guy asked him, he's like, of all the thousands of gods, like, how would I know which the true God is? And his answer was so quick. He said, it's the one you hate.
That's good. That's perfect.
And he knew immediately, like, which, like, what's the first, when I say it's the one you hate, what's the one that comes to mind? That's the one. Because you don't hate Zeus or Thor or whatever the heck it is that you're trying to say. It's the one that you are outright rejecting right now with this question. You know which one.
Yeah. Oh yeah. People like to play around like they don't really know. Oh, you know. Yeah. You definitely know which one you're rejecting.
Which one are you most angry at? Which one do you like? Does it bother you that other people believe in? That's the one.
That's the one. That's it. So here's the second therefore. Therefore the anger of the Lord was kindled against his people, and he stretched out his hand against them and struck them, and the mountains quaked, and their corpses were as a refuge in the midst of the streets. For all this, his anger has not turned away, and his hand is stretched out still. We're going to hear that particular language in chapter 9 over and over about his anger has not turned away and his hand is still stretched out. And he goes on to, in these last about 5 verses, basically to talk about God calling a foreign nation to come and to wreak this kind of destruction upon Israel in order that God might start anew with Israel. So here's how that goes. He will raise a signal for nations far away and whistle for them from the end of the earth. And behold, quickly, speedily they come. None is weary, none stumbles, none slumbers or sleeps. Not a waistband is loose and not a sandal strap broken. Their arrows are sharp, all their bows bent. Their horses' hooves seem like flint and their wheels like the whirlwind. Their roaring is like a lion. Like young lions they roar, they growl and seize their prey. They carry it off and none can rescue. They growl over it on that day like the growling of the sea. And if one looks to the land, behold darkness and distress, and the light is darkened by its clouds.
That's a wild image, man, of God. This impression of God like putting his fingers in his mouth and whistling, and just notifying the nations that you are now allowed to do what it is that you want to do.
Yeah, calling them. I can still hear my dad whistling. I could hear him from a long distance. So it's time to come. Well, this is God whistling.
Saying, hey, that hedge, it's down.
Mm-hmm. Whistle for the Assyrians and whistling for the Babylonians. They hear, and here they come. And just read through those verses, and their coming is not good news for the inhabitants of Israel and Jerusalem.
Yeah, and of course, more than an implication is that God is going to do nothing to stop this. This is the whole fence being broken down and then whistling for the nation, saying, hey, the wall's down, and I'm not going to do anything to stop what it is in your heart to already do. Yeah. The
vineyard is open for destruction. And that's where we're going to have to end for today, but don't go away. We got Isaiah 6, which is just a fantastic chapter. Fabulous call vision coming up next episode, so we will get there next time.
All right. We'll see you then, Chad.
See you then.